You're live.
Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I would entertain a motion to reconvene in open session. Moved by Carl, seconded by Tony. All those in favor? I see no opposed. Thank you, colleagues. We acknowledge the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. We offer this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples of Canada. What I have learned from Indigenous peoples with whom I've walked is that our relationship with the land is one of stewardship rather than ownership, and I'm honored to make this journey with them. I would ask if any board member has any declaration of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, the first agenda item is awards recognition, and I will turn it over to you, Chief.
Good morning, Chair Redmond and members of the board, and great to be with you in October. A very special day for us today on many fronts, but these are exciting agenda items. I'm very pleased to welcome two significant members of our service who do so much, not only internally, but also externally. The first I'd like to introduce is Staff Sergeant Eric Boynton, and I'll speak to his award very shortly. I'd also like to welcome and introduce Sergeant Kelly Preble, who's with us today as well. The first celebration that I'd like to highlight is recognition on behalf of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and it is an award that Staff Sergeant Boynton is receiving. It's the IACP 40 Under 40 Award, and Eric joins 40 global police leaders in being recognized for outstanding leadership, outstanding work, and outstanding commitment, both internally and externally. In particular, Eric has been recognized as one of the top rising leaders around the globe who continues to exemplify leadership, dedication, and service to communities as well as to policing. And we're so very proud that Eric currently serves as a staff sergeant in our Equity and Inclusion and Diversity Unit, is doing a significant amount of work both internally and externally. You know, on behalf of Deputy Hilton and Deputy Crowell and the entire WRPS team, we're so very proud that Eric has been chosen by the International Association of Chiefs of Police as a 40 Under 40. He's the second recipient of our organization to be recognized by this global organization. And I'm extremely very proud on a personal note as I sit on the board of directors, and it's great to see Eric recognized as one of the small contingent of Canadians being recognized globally. Eric is highly regarded within our service and externally. He's actually heavily involved both as a member of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Working Group. He's doing national work on behalf of the CACP as well in advancing equity, inclusion, in policing. And more locally, he continues to work and changing and transforming our workforce and ensuring that we better serve our future generations. And so we're extremely proud. Eric is a proud father as well. He manages a busy personal life with a busy professional life. And in the midst of all of this, he's also in the process of completing his doctoral dissertation which is focused around diversity within Ontario policing. So again, on behalf of the 1,200 members of the Waterloo Police Service, I present to you the Police Services Board, one of our top rising stars, and a IACP award winner 40 Under 40, Staff Sergeant Eric Boynton. Congratulations, Eric.
So Eric, on behalf of the board, can I just say how incredibly impressed and proud we are of your accomplishments. I know that most of us have been to badging ceremonies. Some of the newer members may not have gotten to because of the pandemic, but the fact that there are bright young people who are choosing policing as a career because of the changing face of the police force is very exciting in the way we deliver service and make sure our community is safe. So you are a fine representative of the future of policing, and we in our community are in your debt for your great work. So congratulations on this outstanding achievement. Did you want to say anything, Eric?
Thank you, Chair Redmond and the board and Chief and deputies. Just a lot of gratitude and appreciation for all your support. And I look forward to continuing the work that we do to serve the region of Waterloo.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back to you, Chief.
Thanks so much. And again, virtual congratulations. It's always unfortunate that we can't do this in person and celebrate. Next, on behalf of Deputy Chief Hilton and Deputy Chief Crowell, we're also very excited to recognize a national award winner, Sergeant Kelly Preble, who has the 2021 Blue Line Lifetime in Law Enforcement Award. A little bit of context is Blue Line is a professional magazine. I think we just have somebody on mute, not on mute. We're getting feedback here. Whoops. I think it's, there we go. So again, sorry about that. Just some significant feedback, but Blue Line is an actual professional organization that produces a police professional magazine across Canada. It recognizes leadership, and it has a series of educational seminars and webinars, as well as recognizes leadership in policing. And for some of you, Sergeant Kelly Preble is a known commodity in our region. Starting her career in 1994, I vividly recall Kelly as a young recruit, as does Deputy Hilton, where she served in South Division. But Kelly was actively an active Conestoga College student. She was actively involved as a volunteer with the police service, heavily involved in then Police Ventures, which was a youth group and working with youth, and brought so much enthusiasm and excitement and innovation to our organization. Over her career, she's worked in a series of different locations, including working in obviously patrol, where we all start our foundation, but served as a community resource officer, worked in general investigations detectives, was a uniform recruiter, a detective sergeant, a field supervisor, and most recently did significant work in the 4Ws in our townships, bringing significant community partnerships, community stakeholder building, and leadership. She's recently transitioned to a new role in our organization, which is the Community Engagement and Wellbeing Unit, where she brings her vast enthusiasm, leadership, and excitement for community, and is now pushing that across the region. And so while I apologize to Mayor Shantz and our 4Ws, I think that the foundation of the work that Kelly does is now actually traversing across our great region. This is a significant award. Kelly has been involved in supporting and advancing many different initiatives, including women in policing and women in leadership roles. And she has been selected as an achievement, Lifetime Law Enforcement Award achievement across our nation. And so this is a national recognition for all the work that she's done. She's done significant work with our rural communities, as well as developing road safety initiatives in our various rural communities. But I think at the heart of it, it's essentially her commitment to service and her commitment to community and her passion on how she provides policing with tremendous empathy, tremendous care. And I think in many ways, she's never forgotten of her roots in the rural township of where she grew up. And so please join me in congratulating Sergeant Kelly Preble on this outstanding achievement, the national award selected by peers as the Blue Line Lifetime in Law Enforcement Award. Congratulations, Kelly. We're so very proud of you. Well done.
So Kelly, if I can just add my voice on behalf of the board, you do make us proud, and nobody can ever appreciate the impact and the complexity of policing. But when I did a ride along, I was amazed that you knew everybody. And I know that so much of the service that we offer is really about relationships. And not only did you know everybody everywhere we went, you had a story about every stretch of highway that we toured, and you knew where to get the very best baking. So congratulations. You look far too young to have a lifetime award, but this is a wonderful national recognition. And if you'd like to say a few words, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chief, and acknowledge the work being done by our deputies, as well as Chair Redmond. Thank you for your words, and all of the board members. And thanks to Blue Line Magazine. For those who know me, I'm not usually lacking for words, but in trying to reflect on this award, there's been a lot of words swirling around, and I come back to the point that it's really a small reflection of the work being done by our sworn members and our civilian members in the organization. It truly is. And, it was about the stories. And as you said, Chair Redmond, that, we're always stats driven. And, the work that's being done is truly reflected in the stories that we can share. And it's these interactions and the small impacts that have the greatest impact, really. And I've really transitioned into, getting away from presentations and appreciating the small conversations, having more of those. And I have to acknowledge, throughout my career, I've had great opportunities from supervisors and the organization support, including from the chief down, and freedoms in being creative. And I just want to truly show my appreciation and thank the chief and everybody for this acknowledgement. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know, Sandy, do you want to add a word of regret that she's not in your hood anymore?
I would actually. I was quite disappointed to hear that we lost her, and I just put a little note in the chat that we had said we would have a bit of a walkabout sometime, and it never came to pass. So if you're ever back in the neighborhood, it still stands. The offer is there.
And for sure, I will take that opportunity. We will do that.
Thank you, and congratulations for both Kelly and Eric. Very well-deserved recognition of hard work and leadership within this amazing service. The next agenda item is the consent agenda items. Does anyone have any items in the consent agenda they'd like me moved to the regular agenda? I'm seeing none, so I would entertain a motion to move the consent agenda. Moved by Rosita, seconded by Karen. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. That is carried. Thank you. Next is business arising from the minutes. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Again, seeing none. Item 10 is correspondence, and 10.1 is the Ontario Association of Police Services Board the Labor Conference sponsorship request. And I'd ask Jill Eggleton to please speak to this item.
Thanks, Chair Redmond and members of the board. So in your package, you'll have correspondence from the OAPSB, and you'll see that they're requesting sponsorships for their labor conference that's taking place in November. We did sponsor their annual conference that took place earlier this year in the spring. So in the past, we've typically sponsored one event or the other. For the CAPG, or the national group, we opted this year as well to sponsor their annual conference and not some of the other governance summits. So if the board would like to continue choosing to sponsor one event, this would just be for information. If there is interest in sponsoring the labor conference, the sponsorship levels are included in the package for consideration.
Thanks very much, Jill. So this can be received for information unless somebody would put forward a motion to further sponsor this. Seeing none, we'll receive that for information. And the agenda item 10.2 is the Canadian Association of Police Governance. This is regarding a call for proposals for the 2023 conference to serve as host. And again, I would look to Ms. Eggleton.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. This correspondence is from the National Association, the CAPG. So when they look at conference locations for their annual conference each year, they will issue a call for proposals to host the annual conference. So in the correspondence that's in your package, you'll see their call for proposal for hosting duties for the 2023 annual conference. In the correspondence, they do outline the obligations for the host board. So there is both financial and human resources that the board needs to provide to be the host board. So the financial obligation is $30,000, and that would be over 2 fiscal years, the majority being in 2023. And then the human resources required, and that would be involving volunteers to support conference activities during the conference, organizing the companion program, and working with the CAPG on venues for their offsite events, as well as the hotel and the meeting room requirements for the delegates. So from both a financial and human resources aspect, it would require quite a bit of resources. If the board is interested in pursuing this, we would have some additional work to do just to see if we could meet some of the criteria that they're going to be using in the decision-making process. When they're looking at the proposals that they receive. So if we did choose to put in a proposal to host, we would need to put it in by October the 31st of 2022.
So colleagues, go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair Redmond. I guess I'm just wondering, have we hosted one of either this particular conference or any others in the last, I don't know, recent memory? I didn't see that there. And I guess the question, so that's to Jill, and then the question to the chief is, part of leading and being a leading police service sometimes is to do these things. So I just wonder whether this is something that what's your advice on whether this is good? I mean, to either highlight the work that we're doing, the importance that we're doing, the work that we're doing, and showing some leadership that way. So I guess it's a question. I don't personally see that we have a lot of space to do this, but maybe Jill, and then to the chief.
Thanks, Ian. Jill?
Yeah, so the first question was around if we've hosted in the past. This particular conference, we haven't. There is in the package the previous and future locations. So you can see it's in the last page of their request for proposals. No, we are not on that list, and it goes back, I think, to 1990. Chief Larkin, maybe no. I think there was a conference that was hosted here previous to me, but I don't think it was the provincial or the national association. So I don't think we've hosted either one of those.
Chief, would you like to comment?
Thanks very much. Locally, we've never hosted governance related conferences and or seminars. We have hosted the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police on a number of occasions, and we have hosted the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police on a number of occasions. The Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police has really gone to a framework of a major city in the sense of conference centers because of the trade show, et cetera. And my recommendation in particularly with the Canadian Association of Police Governments is they would be similar to the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police because of the national framework, the trade show, and some of the demands. I think there would be some challenging logistically. We're just not, maybe as a community, not there yet. But probably more aligned, for example, to host the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police Services Boards as a first iteration. There's a significant impact on obviously the board to coordinate, and there would be some impact on the police service. I always see value in promoting our community, promoting us as a driver of policy, as well as economic change across the province and nation. I'm not sure that I would recommend we start with the national level. We may want to start more provincially. But again, Councillor Kiefer sits on the national board and likely has some insight. But we've never hosted any governance-related associations in our community. Simply the police leadership side.
Carl, did you want to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. And I would agree with the chief on his comments there with regards to it. I sit on the National Governance Board, and actually I sat on the committee that sets up conferences, and the next year's conference is going to be in Saskatoon. And as the chief said, that they're setting it up, for major cities. In our case, I think somewhere down the road we should, get involved, and of course we have 3 cities to pick from, and we would have to say, well, it's in the region of Waterloo that we would host this thing, and go forth from there. But the governance, this group, the governance group, is a good, I think, a very good group, and what they do to promote policing nationally is very important. And I equate it much to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, where I sat on that board for 6 years, and it's a very important group. So I would agree with the chief that somewhere down the road, not next year, but somewhere down the road, it would be a good thing to host. And I'm sure Ian would agree with that, as everybody would agree with that. Thanks.
Thank you, Carl. So what I'm hearing is it may be a good idea in the future, but it's not where we want to go right now. So if somebody thinks differently, please indicate, or we will just receive this for information and continue on. I see no hands. Thank you, colleagues. Agenda item 11 is Police Services Board Report. Chief, is this over to you?
Thanks so much. I think we'll move to, I don't believe there's anything specific to SB reports, so we can move into the Chief of Police reports. We have 4 agenda items. The first one, it's with tremendous pleasure and excitement that I'm pleased to introduce our Youth in Policing initiative. And I do want to welcome 2 guests joining us today that I will turn the floor over to shortly. But first, I want to recognize the leadership of Deputy Crowell and the Human Resources team, Molly Kimple and Miss Alexis Richards. This was a vision and a dialogue. As Deputy Hilton would say, it was one of my butterflies that was sent out in some dialogue, and it was captured and really came to life. And I'm very excited. Over the course of the summer, on very short turnaround time, and thanks to the support of the provincial government, in particular the Ministry of Children and Youth Services, we were able to employ 11 students from across our community and welcome them into our organization. And I firmly believe that, you know, when you bring youth into our organization and they have the ability to connect, they have the ability to engage, they have the ability to share, it's a tremendous growth opportunity, not only for the police service, but for the young individuals as well, but more importantly for our members. That the growth that, you know, that young people and our youth, who are, you know, 20% of our population, but 100% of our future, bring into our organization is amazing. And thanks to the great work of our human resources team led by Miss Alexis Richards, we hosted 11 amazing young people from our community. And we hosted 5 youth who were referred from our Sonali Canadian Association of Waterloo Region, 2 youth from our Kind Minds Family Wellness referrals, 2 youth from the Shamrose for Syrian Culture Center referrals, and 2 youth from Adventure for Change. And over the course of this 8-week period, they were assigned in a variety of different areas, and they were also engaged in employment opportunities, employment skills, development, leadership development. And it was amazing to see them hustling and bustling across our region in all the divisions. And I had the pleasure at headquarters to see them on a daily basis and the energy that they brought into our organization. The goal was really essentially was around actually, you know, building this opportunity of relationships, and it forms a part of our path forward. It forms part of our future and the engagement of young individuals, a youth engagement strategy, a recruitment strategy, as well as building long-term relationships. And so it was very exciting. Of course, we had them from July 5th to August 27th. Dr. Schnarr got to meet them at the badge ceremony in the city of Kitchener. They were all there, and they've probably got the loudest shout out and the loudest applause. It was simply amazing. For myself, you know, what I'm heartened with is that, you know, in a time of significant community division, in a time of a global pandemic, in a time of relationships that are strained across many different sectors, including policing, these 11 students came into our organization with various experiences and relations with policing, some having no connection. But at the end, I think that we made, collectively, they made 11, you know, new friends. It meant probably more than 11 new friends in our organization, but we made 11 new friends who I know will continue to be a part of our organization. And now we're sorting out, how do we bring them back into our organization? How do we find other youth employment opportunities? And so I'm really excited to welcome 2 students who have taken time from their busy academic schedule to join us today. Both of them did provide closing comments on behalf of their teams. First, I'd like to welcome Miss Fardoza Mursal from Cameron Heights, who's joining us, as well as Mr. Hussein Omar from Forest Heights, who's joining us. And so I'm going to turn it over to both Fardoza and Hussein. I don't know if they've agreed as to who's going to say or speak first, but how about I turn it over to you, Fardoza, to kick things off. Welcome to both of you. It's great to see you.
Great. Oh, thank you so much, everyone. Good morning, Chief, as well as the deputies and the Police Service Board, and all guests attending this meeting. I'm very excited to, oh, can you guys hear me? Oh, can you hear me
Cardoza, oh yeah, we can hear you.
now? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, sorry, okay. Okay, sorry. I'm very excited to share my experience. Into coming to the, okay, perfect. Thank you. I joined the Youth and Policing Initiative program because I was really interested in learning about my local police service. I wanted to learn more about their mission statements, the different units and branches, as well as to shadow police officers' day-to-day life. Coming into this program, I was certain that when I was leaving, I would leave with more knowledge and skills. And that was the final push for me to enroll into this program. Over the 2 months, I had amazing experiences and many highlights. Visiting the farm with constable custody was undoubtedly one of the highlights of my time in the YIPI program. I was able to enjoy different environments and learn about a new way of living just around the corner. Attending the online seminar was another fantastic experience I had throughout my 2 months. During these seminars, I learned about issues and problems that certain groups were facing within our region, and how the police services and other communities are going to combat this issue. I've also developed a number of transferable skills that I'll be able to apply in the present and in the future. Lastly, the initiative projects that I was able to do were very exciting and interesting. I got to research about interesting topics such as the police services mental health calls and the response, the increase in youth crime and in crime in general. And I got to research other provincial and national police services and their response to these type of issues. The YIPI program has definitely impacted my future career plans. Walking into this program, I didn't know what I wanted to do for the future, but now after I've completed this program, and it's been months and I've let it kind of mine now, becoming a police officer, or just working in the WRPS work environment. You know, I really enjoy the work they do, and I hope that I can do that kind of graduated from the first annual class. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Fardoza, and that's amazing. And we're so very excited to have you a part of our team. You're an amazing young leader, amazing young community leader, and you brought so much energy and enthusiasm, as well as a great sense of humor. And so, you know, we look forward to celebrating in person. And so thank you. And I'll have you stay on the line because there may be some questions. But first, I want to turn it over to Mr. Hussein Omar, who was one of the best dressed young leaders. He always came in, he taught me a lot about fashion. And so Hussein, welcome aboard. It's great to see you. Over to you.
Good morning, everybody. How are you guys doing today? Hope you guys are doing great. So yeah, my name is Hussein Omar. I was one of the YIPI students. I hope you guys can hear me well. I don't know if you guys can hear me well. So yeah, I was
we
one
can
of the
hear you.
Yeah, so thank you. I was one of the YIPI students that at the moment I was in high school, and then I got opportunity to work, to come in like and start working with the police as a EP student program. I saw the program. Then it was an opportunity for me to learn more about the police, what kind of like departments the police have. So that was my main goal, was to go out there and get something that I never knew, something that I wanted to change my vision and see like something new about the police, to learn about the police. And then I had the opportunity to work with the HR office with Alexis. We had Ben. We had a lot of. We had Ben over there. We have a lot of like. We had a lot of good people down there. We had I forgot most of the names, but they're still down there. Alexis, Richard, so good people down there. So we had the opportunity to work with them. I also had the opportunity to meet a lot of great people, like outside of the human resources. I got to meet new friends, Firdousa and everybody. They were great. It was an opportunity to meet like new friends, make new friends, and also learn about them, and so that they can learn more about me as well. So that was another opportunity for me to learn more about some people that I never knew. Some people had good knowledge about some stuff that I never knew, so which was good. And I also had the opportunity to go down to other divisions. I went to different divisions, like the crime analysis. Like I went to the communication branch. I went to the trafficking and cybercrime. I think the cybercrime. I went down there, and then I saw we had to learn different stuff. I also went to the canine section, where we had like the dog. They showed how they train the dogs, what the dogs do in different situations. So it was a good learning for me. Yeah, and then within the last the last 2 months, I changed like my mindset toward the police change. Like before, like my mindset toward the police was different than before I came, after I came. So when I left there, so now I want to work with the police. I want to go out there. After my high school, I want to go and study human resources, and then hopefully be one of the members in the WRPS. Hopefully that's the goal, and then hopefully go down there, and then hopefully I can be one of you guys. So that's the main goal right now. Thank you.
Thank you both so much for your first-person candid recollections and reflection on what this experience meant to you. And I know that the chief said that you spoke at the conclusion of your program, so I can see why you were chosen to speak, because you're very clear in the message, and it certainly illuminated some of the experiences for me. Are there any questions from the board? Seeing none, thank you both very much for coming to relate these experiences. Wish you the very best in your educational pursuits. And Chief, do you want some closing comments?
Just some closing comments. Want to once again thank our WRPS team across the service, Staff Superintendent Goodman, and all of the senior leadership team that chipped in to support the program. We turned this around very quickly as a part of our path forward. But I think on behalf of the organization, you can see the energy that we get from Firdousa and Hussein. Of course, you multiply that by the 9 others that were with the team. It was a great experience for us. It was a great experience for our organization to learn about youth. You learn about their perceptions, their views, their ideas on public policy, as well as how we interact with young people, how we can actually advance relationships. There was a lot of amazing dialogue. And I think one of the responsibilities of policing as a community leader is to invest. It's to invest in our community. It's to invest in our young people because they are our future. And I think that, over the 8 weeks, we put significant investment. Again, thanks to the government for supporting that. But I think we have 11 people now that understand policing very different. And they can actually speak on public policy. They can actually share information and connect with us. And I'm very excited to replicate and grow this program in 2022. But I'm also very excited to see Firdousa and Hussein find other opportunities, whether it be through employment or engagement and volunteer opportunities in our service. And so once again, I want to thank the entire team, but most importantly, recognize Firdousa and Hussein today for joining us. Thanks for taking time out of your busy academic schedules. It's amazing, and we wish you all the best in this semester, but we know we're going to see you shortly. We'll drag you back into the organization to have some fun and to learn from you. So thank you so much.
Hussein, did you want a final word? I see your hands up.
Yeah, quickly, I want to say thank you guys for the opportunity. Of course, Like, and my goal for the summer, obviously, like other than traveling, was because we had like the pandemic and everything. So I had an opportunity to learn different stuff. So that was good. So I want to thank you guys, and hopefully I'll be back next year with you guys. Hopefully one of the EP students, and hopefully as a help, I'll try to come down there and help you guys in way. And then I'll come down there. Hopefully within the couple, I don't know, the next couple of weeks, and then come sit down there, come say hi to my main group. Like I had a group down there at the HR office with Alexis and everybody down there. So I'll come down there a couple of times and say hi to you guys. So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah, so thank you guys.
Thanks so much. It appears that we've lost Chair Redmond. I don't know if it's just me, but it appears we've lost Chair Redmond off the call. But again, I want to thank the board for your continued support. This forms part of our path forward. And I very much anticipate in 2022 replicating, and if not, improving, enhancing, and growing the program as we move forward. So I'll just pause for a moment, and well, it looks like Councillor Kiefer is letting them know that we've lost. I see Dr. Schnarr has her hand up.
Yeah, what a wonderful, to your point, I got the opportunity to meet some of the students involved. What a fantastic group. I was just going to ask, and I know we've got...
Sorry about that. The internet in its judicious ability has...
I think she's now frozen and has a different name. I'm just going to keep going here for the sake of time. I'm just wondering, because I know we're talking about budget stuff, so I later on today, but Chief Larkin, you mentioned that you're looking to sort of expand it. And I was just going to ask if there's capacity to do it, because this was such a positive experience, I think, both for the students and also for the service. I wonder if, how many students do you think? I mean, we've got 11. I'd love to see even more. And I was just wanting to get a sense of what capacity may be for you in this going forward. Because what a success, and kudos to the team there for thinking about this and instituting it.
Thanks, Dr. Schnarr, and I'm going to have you join me next time I'm in Deputy Crowell's office. He definitely supports replicating the program. He's the caution tale on the side of my shoulder. So Shirley's on one shoulder saying, do it, and Deputy Crowell's on the other side. Hang on here. So we are looking at replicating. We are looking at growing. Obviously, it's subject to some funding from the government, as well as looking at internal capacity. We are hoping that next year that we find ourselves in a different position from the pandemic. The pandemic did limit some of the activities and experiences and opportunities. And so if we're in a different position, we'd like to actually advance that and grow it to a reasonable number. But one of our goals is to actually welcome back and provide opportunities for members who were in the initial YIPI program to return as leaders. So they would actually be coordinating and leading and being and gaining leadership skills in coordinating and supporting some of our program base. And so, Deputy Crowell, you may have some comments on that, but I think we can grow it. We're just working through those processes. But the recommendation internally definitely is to replicate. And I know Staff Superintendent Goodman, this is part of their overall youth engagement strategy, as well as part of our continued path forward. But Mark, you may have some comments around growth and expansion.
Thank you, Chief, members of the board. Nothing like a public declaration to spur action. You've said it well, Chief. We hope to replicate and grow, responsibly. We just need to ensure that we have the proper mechanisms in place, and that, because we're decentralized in our divisions, what we learned through the program is bringing the students together for some of the centralized programming is an important component. So issues of travel, day-to-day coordination play into some of those decisions, and funding, as the Chief has mentioned. But the success is clear, and the platform to replicate and expand over time is there. And we're also taking notes from other services that have done this for some time. So very successful, and thanks for the support and the great question.
Thanks so much. And Councillor Kiefer, are you chairing now? I see that Mr. McLean has his hand up.
I don't know whether this is a conspiracy against Carl, the chair and vice chair, but he seems to be frozen too. So we're throwing this right over to you, Chief Larkin, to
I
manage.
think we're having some.
Oh,
can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
yeah. Okay, I just make a comment and then throw it back to Councillor Kiefer. I mean, what tremendous ambassadors for this program. Amazing. And what a great experience too. I think one of the challenges, certainly in I think every organization, whether it's business or otherwise, talent's a big challenge. We've talked about this of recruiting the best and the brightest, and in policing, much like public service and beyond, talent's a huge issue. So having this type of experience and being able to tell the story of a positive experience in policing and encouraging those in their community to consider it as a career in and of itself probably has some benefit. I think later when we get to the budget and some correspondence we've had around other issues, I'll have some other comments to make, but I would say this is a type of program that I think goes a long way to kind of making policing more accessible for a broader array of folks. And so I'll join Ms. Schnarr and Dr. Schnarr and you to crowd Deputy Crowell's office when we have that discussion. So
thanks so much, Mr. McLean, and I appreciate your support as well as the entire board. And I've always, as the deputies know, I like to set unreasonable timeline expectations. And so I think obviously, hopefully we can advance the program. I have heard from Chair Redmond electronically. Apparently there's an internet issue in the boardroom. They are working on it. And so maybe we'll just take a 3 to 5 minute pause until we can get things sorted out, if that sounds good for everybody. This is a whole new world that we're experiencing. So we'll check in with them.
So you think I am back? Can anybody hear me?
Your mic, yeah, we can hear you. Your mics are on, so don't swear. Just word of advice there.
We had a presentation from Swift at our council meeting last night, and the presenter's internet went down. I thought it was so ironic.
Technology is great when it works, except for it doesn't work when you need it to work sometimes.
That happens to me when I teach every once in a while, like just depending on if I'm teaching from home and my kids are doing stuff, and I just say to my students, look, it could go out. If it goes out, just wait, I'll be back. Just be patient.
My favorite is that everyone blames the others. It's not my Wi-Fi, it's your Wi-Fi. It must be on your end. You're frozen on your end. It's not me.
Just as an update, we have offered other office locations. They're currently in the boardroom, and there appears to be a tech issue. So we have offered other office space within headquarters. We're just, for those that are live streaming or on, please be patient. We have a technical difficulty, so stay tuned.
Yeah. Can you send it to me? Yeah.
So Carl, move, you're still live, right?
I think so now. Yeah, we can hear you, Chair Redmond, and we can see you. Can they hear you? Here.
We're figuring this out.
No, because yeah.
I was about to restart something in here, but if people are working, I'm not going to touch anything. Then.
Okay. Can everybody hear me? So I think we MacGyvered a remedy, and I want to thank IT and the quick thinking of Holly Kent and Jill Eggleton. And I guess just observe that this is a very good meeting because it kicked me out. So obviously it has higher standards. So we're going to resume. That was a wonderful intervention. I did not hear Hussein at the very end, but it appears all of you did, and it sounded like a good conversation, a wonderful program. The next agenda item 12.2 is fees and charges bylaw. And I believe, Chief, go ahead.
Nope. Thanks very much, Chair Redmond. I'm pleased to welcome our Director of Finance, Ms. Kirsten Hand, as well as Legal Counsel, Ms. Virginia Torrance, for a presentation on a recommendation. There is a recommendation before the board, but I'll turn it over to Ms. Hand and Ms. Torrance to present the fees and charges bylaw. Good morning, Kirsten and Virginia.
Good morning. Every 2 years, we review our fees and charges bylaw, and we look at a couple different things. First of all, we look at whether the fees and charges are able to cover the costs of providing the service. And secondly, we do a comparison to other police services to ensure that we're within a reasonable fee structure. So that review was completed. And it was reviewed internally. The revised bylaw is before you today for recommendation of approval. There was very little changes that were made to the fee structures. They still remained relevant to cover costs associated with providing the service. And there was a little bit of cleanup of some wording and some items that had expired. So basically, the proposed bylaw is before you for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Virginia, did you want to add anything, or are you here to answer the tough questions?
I don't have anything to add, Chair Redmond.
Thank you. So what we have before us is a proposed change to our fees and charges bylaw to bring them up to date. I don't see any questions or comments. Is there somebody that would like to move approval of that? Moved by Tony, seconded by Rosita. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Sometimes those things feel a little bit dry. They excite some people, but not everybody, but they're so important to keep up to date. So Kirsten and Virginia, thank you for your conscientious hard work. Next agenda item is the draft operating and capital budget. And before I throw it over to the chief, I just want to thank the Waterloo Regional Police Services for the 2022 draft operating and capital budget. And I will turn it over to you, Chief, and maybe reserve the right for some comments before we go into questions.
Thanks very much, Chair Redmond. I appreciate the opportunity to present the first iteration of the 2022 draft operating and capital budget on behalf of the members of Waterloo Police Service. And it's with privilege that we take this opportunity to spend the next time with the board to go through the proposal budget, as well as provide some context. I think what we've seen today in today's board meeting is the uniqueness of our profession, the uniqueness of the service that we provide to our community. We highlighted and started the meeting with Staff Sergeant Boynton and Sergeant Kelly Premble, and they're the stories and the humans behind the work. Every single day, it's the 1,200 members of our organization that work collectively to solve and to address complex social issues. There's no doubt that we're living in challenging times. There's no doubt that reformation of public sector and continued dialogue about the transformation of policing continues. And on behalf of Deputy Crowell and Deputy Hilton, we want to reaffirm our commitment to continued transformation, continued innovation, and continued reformation of our profession. That being said, we also are so immensely proud of our members, and we're also very privileged to serve the board. And so joining me today in the presentation will be our Director of Finance, Ms. Kirsten Hand, and I want to recognize Kirsten and her amazing team that have pulled together all the finite details behind the scenes as we go through the iteration. So I'd like to provide some high-level context and move through before we get to the 5 scenarios that we'll be presenting. As the board is aware, and is that obviously our police service is governed by the Ontario Police Services Act. It regulates and legislates the responsibilities. It also sets out the core requirements for adequate and effective policing. And they're built around 5 key principles. And those key principles are the foundation of what we do every single day. They're the foundation of what drives us. And it's really the foundation of why we acquire the talent that we do. And it's about preventing crime. It's about enforcing legislation and enforcing laws. It's about helping victims of crime as well as victims of tragic circumstances. It's about maintaining and keeping public order. And no doubt, during the pandemic, this has been a significant challenge and a pressure on our police service, as well as about responding to emergencies. And it's about response 24 hours a day, 365 and 7 days a week. It also sets out that municipalities must also provide support systems, infrastructure, voice radio systems, buildings and facilities, as well as equipment to carry out the activities of policing. Ultimately, the responsibility lies within the Police Services Board to govern, and my responsibility on your behalf is to ensure that we're meeting these effective and adequate requirements of effective policing. And we're so very well served in Waterloo Region with a Police Services Board that is engaged as well as extremely involved in the discussion. So what does this look like from a budgetary perspective locally? And if we look at the 2021 approved budget, you can see that it was $185.3 million. And the breakdown, I wanted to provide the board as well as our community a breakdown of what that looks like. In many different ways, you can see that About 72% of our budget, or $133.2 million, is dedicated to providing public safety services. It's provided to those mandates of preventing crime, enforcing the law, maintaining public order. It's a significant piece of our organizational and operating budget. You can see that 25% is on the administration and infrastructure, so about $47.2 million. We're a complex organization to operate 24/7. We have voice radio systems, records management systems, a very intricate information technology system. As the board is aware, we're currently piloting body-worn and in-car camera, but our facilities are all audio and videotaped. There's a lot of complexity to the work that we do, as well as ensuring that it remains significantly secure through encryption and other formats. About 2% is on emergency response and public order, which is about $4.1 million. And then there's a 1% that covers many different other small sundries, including the governance of the Police Services Board, which is approximately $330,000 a year for the Police Services Board to operate effectively and efficiently. The annual budget process, this is a significant piece of work that we do. Essentially, when we approve the 2021 budget, we commence our work on the 2022 budget. This is an ongoing monitoring, analysis, and significant amount of work that goes into it. And full credit to Ms. Hand and her team for keeping us on track and doing all of the analysis. But what does the process look like? And we want to provide insight and context is that, we start with a consistent base budget review, as well as a review of our capital projects, looking at timing, looking at different processes. The senior and mid leaders across our service perform comprehensive base budget reviews, as well as then followed by budget submissions, planning, as well as that base budget review piece. Those are always moved through the respective systems. And so Deputy Crowell and Deputy Hilton work with their teams to ensure that they can meet the adequacy standards, can meet the levels of demand of service. Ms. Hand and her team look at whether or not it's aligned with the strategic business plan, look at different opportunities for cost avoidance, et cetera. This year, unique, we also launched a special budget committee for further review and recommendations, which was chaired by Ms. Hand, and included a series of police leaders across section from across the region to look at the totality of the budget submissions, as well as to look at the overall linkages and alignment with the board's strategic business plan, as well as the crime severity and the different demands on policing. As the board is aware, in 2018, we conducted a significant staffing and workload demand plan, which highlighted the resources needed to address increasing demands, workload, and community expectations for our community. That staffing and workload demand identified 147 full-time equivalents between the years of 2019 to 2022 to maintain with the demand on calls for service, to maintain the demand on the complexities of crime, but also around regional population growth. We see our region continues to grow at one of the fastest rates in Canada. Over the last 3 years, of the 147 positions identified, we've hired 47. And that has also been decided through, we looked at different alternative service delivery options, including the allocation of the envelope of monies internally differently. But in the end, based on other fiscal demands and fiscal pressures within the region, we only ever advanced 47 full-time equivalents. So what does this look like? We're an amazing region. We're not without challenges. We're not without social and complex issues. But I still believe at the heart of it, we have a system-wide approach to doing business differently than other communities. We currently serve a population of 630,000, and we know that that is slated to continue to grow. We're seeing investments in our international airport. We're seeing investments in technology. We're obviously known as the global tech sector of the North. We're seeing manufacturing find its footing in different areas, particularly in Cambridge and North Dumfries. And we're also seeing a resurgence with the LRT. We're seeing a resurgence of intensification along the LRT corridor, significant growth, significant neighborhood expansion, and our rural communities are expanding, particularly in Wilmot and Woolwich, where we're seeing continued growth. I always pause for a moment and take a deep breath to recognize that we're the 10th largest census metropolitan area in Canada. And that's unique in the sense that, we have 3 amazing post-secondary world-class institutions, which bring with it almost 70,000 vibrant young people to our community. That has unintended consequences as well, but there's a driver of economy, there's a driver of so many different research and development pieces. But for us in our community, we're surrounded by 3 urban centers. And of course, within minutes, we find ourselves in rural Waterloo region, where agriculture continues to be at the heart of it. And so we find the best of all worlds. And I think one of the uniqueness, and I think one of the challenges that our governors have is how do we keep that small town feel in a large urban center? The police service itself that you lead as governors is the 12th largest municipal police service in Canada and the 6th largest municipal police service in Ontario. And again, we continue to be one of the fastest growing communities in Canada. So we've always taken an approach, and since 2014, we've always been focused on it isn't always about more. It always isn't about actually adding resources. It's about innovation, transformation, doing business differently. And we're extremely proud. I know the deputies and our leadership team are extremely proud of the work we've done. And it's actually hard to believe. And sometimes our members are pushing back saying the change is so rapid and so constant. We just need to slow down to catch our breath. We've launched more than 50 continuous improvement reviews over the last 5 years, and these are based on the Lean Six Sigma. We've transformed investigative services led by Superintendent Fenton. We've transformed the canine unit led by Superintendent Bursey. We've done a series of organizational restructuring led by Deputy Chief Hilton and Deputy Chief Prowl. We've done some significant civilian professionalization and civilian staffing enhancements led by Ms. Molly Kimple, Ms. Kate Richardson, Ms. Kirsten Hand. We've actually, in the process of continuing to invest in our forensic identification and examination, a very important integral piece led by Superintendent Fenton. Our information technology is the bedrock of our organization, led by Mr. Hillhorst. We continue to invest, and we're grateful for the board's support on significant capital projects that enhance our IT processes. We're currently in the process. We've done some reformation in our court services. We continue to look at how we can do business differently within court services, evidence management, our communication center. We're right now working with all area municipalities on potentially looking at integration and consolidation, and how do we actually share capital expenses, overhead expenses, how do we integrate resources, and how do we do business differently to better serve our citizens, as well as find efficiencies within our multi-tiered system. We're currently working on an administrative staffing alignment, and of course, most recently added a real-time operations center with a regional scheduling unit that manages, directs, and ensures appropriate levels of staffing across the region. It reduces and minimizes overtime. It will continue to focus on large-scale incidences, as well as coordination of criminal investigations. Those are just a snapshot of what we've been doing to find efficiencies within the system, to reallocate within the system. And so at this time, what we wanted to provide the board is, and it is thought-provoking, is 5 different scenarios for the draft 2022 operating budget. And then Ms. Hand will take you through those 5 scenarios, as well as a capital budget piece. And then I'll have some further comments about why we are where we are and where we think we need to go as an organization. But I wanted to provide some context before we get into the numbers. And so at this time, I'll turn it over to our director, Ms. Kirsten Hand. And I guess, Kirsten, just let me know when you want me to advance the slide, and I'll do that on your behalf. So welcome, Kirsten.
Thank you. I also specifically want to recognize 2 individuals. Without them, all the incredible amount of work that goes into the budget process wouldn't be able to be done. And that's Susan Wilson, our manager of finance unit, as well as Jennifer Chang, our financial analyst. Next slide, please. So before you today is a number of scenarios. The board had requested some information for consideration, discussion, and direction. The first column identifies what the 2021 operating budget, it was worth $185 million looked like, and there's 5 scenarios from there. You'll also notice that the way that we represent the impact on regional taxes is slightly changed in alignment with the way that the region is presenting that information. The average regional taxes per 100K of residential assessment is shown rather than the average household numbers previously, as there was some discussion around, what is an average household value. So scenarios 1 to 4 provide you with some financial information and impacts relating to different expansion scenarios. So increasing our full-time equivalents by 25 officers, 35, 45, and 55. And the associated impacts to the budget are represented, as well as the budget increase and what the increase is, including assessment growth. Scenario 5 represents no expansions to the budget and is based upon the draft operating budget from submissions from our leaders. Next slide, please. Some of the drivers that have impacted the 2022 budget include a couple of different items. So first of all is the estimated or contractual increase on our cost of living adjustment. So that's our salary increase that was more recently negotiated, and any other contractual impacts from that agreement. The agreement was just negotiated for the 2020 to 2024 time period. So we were able to update the budget based upon that information. One of the items that significantly impacted our budget year over year was the benefit costs. And that item alone impacted our budget by 2.4% year over year. A couple of the items that fall into that category include the enhanced Canadian pension plan, increased premiums for our long-term disability program, as well as increased costs for medical, dental, and our retiree benefits. To mitigate the increases, we did look at phasing in the increases for medical and dental over a 3-year time period. We also applied that same methodology to increases in WSIB, and that was perhaps the most significant increase that we saw year over year. The impact on the 2022 budget, while phasing it in over 3 years, was $1 million, and that continues to be an impact on us from a financial perspective. The other item that impacted our 2022 budget is we were notified in 2021 that our court security and prisoner transportation grant would be decreasing by approximately $1 million. So the grant stands at about $4.4 million. We've assumed that that value of the grant will remain constant in 2022. We've also incorporated in investments to the board's strategic business plan and the impact on the 2022 budget. And in your package in Appendix A, you'll see each item there, but it was about $2.1 million, or just over a percent impact year over year. And some of the major projects include digital evidence management system. So that's the provincial system in terms of moving evidence between public safety agencies and the court system. Body-worn video, in-car video, business intelligence tools, our HRIS system, and our new central division. The second last item relates to our vacancy target. As you recall, in the 2021 budget, we did put a $2.5 million vacancy target in our 2021 budget, and that equated to approximately 18 officers. We have in the view, scenario 5 view, assumed that that would go down to only 500K, or approximately 3 officers. And we were successful in achieving that vacancy target for the majority of 2021. But in August, we actually had approximately an 8 or 9 person deficit to the vacancy target. Now, we're not concerned from a 2021 perspective because we were We overachieved that vacancy target for the majority of 2021 by about 20 to 30 positions. But we are concerned in 2022 of keeping that high level of a vacancy target, in that we would not be able to fill positions that are required to run the police service. And the last item there is just capital reserve funding. So we continue with our strategy to increase our reserve funding for capital projects. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. That equated to about a $400K increase year over year. We also incorporated some efficiencies into the budget, both from a technology and facility optimization standpoint. And the last item here on the slide just speaks to regional council provided a target to regional staff, excluding police, of an inflation target of 2 to 3% plus an assessment growth. So at this point, for us to achieve that similar target, we would have to reduce 37 equivalent officers from our current authorized complement. Next page, please. I'll just switch to capital. So in 2022, the capital request is $42.4 million, and that includes carry forward from 2021, estimated at this point at $6.4 million. The majority of our capital spend continues to be facility related items, with approximately 67% of our budget relating to that. And I just want to note that from a facility perspective, we are seeing significant inflation factors. So 7.7% was communicated to us from our regional facilities team to include on the cost estimates over and above last year, and that relates to non-residential construction inflation impacts. From a fleet perspective, we are anticipating to replace and purchase 48 vehicles next year, and all of our police patrol vehicles will be hybrid vehicles. We've transitioned fully to the hybrid vehicle option, with looking at hybrid and electric options for non-police patrol related vehicles as well. For the next slide, please. In terms of the 10-year forecast, some of the major projects incorporated within there, if we can, yep, perfect, is our voice radio project. So that continues to be implemented, the P25 system. We have a variety of IT projects that we've spoken to, including HRIS, next generation 911, body-worn video. A number of facility-related projects. New Central is slated to be completed next year. We have phase 2 of our parking expansion project here at headquarters to address overflow. The implementation of electric vehicle charging stations. We have one at HQ that's been implemented, and as well as implementation of internal review recommendations related to evidence management. And the last item is just our public safety communication center. At this point, this project is not included in our 10-year financial forecast. To operate a communication center is a requirement under the Municipal Act, and the project at this point is anticipated to cost approximately $35 million, of which WRPS could be approximately $23 million. As the chief mentioned, there is a review ongoing, and a consultant report is expected beginning of December to inform that specific project. Next slide, please. In terms of funding sources, we continue to look at reducing our reliance upon debentures, especially for projects that relate to replacement of existing items. And we continue, since we've put in place our strategy and our policy around reserve and reserve funds, to reduce our reliance upon debentures. So from a 10-year capital perspective, last year, 37% of the funding was debentures. That has been able to be reduced down to 30%, as well as between almost $3 million this year in 2021 was anticipated to be funded from debentures, and we were able to fund that through reserve contributions as well. So we continue with that strategy and focus. And we continue with reviewing our capital reserve, which right now does go into a negative in 2026. So we continue to look at mitigating those impacts. Next slide, please. And this just shows you the approximate timeline of some of our major facility projects. As I mentioned, New Central, our big project, is slated for completion in 2022. We had, as you recall, last year pushed out our other facility capital projects to incorporate in the Public Safety Communication Center, as that's the next most urgent, important project that needs to be addressed. After that, we have our facilities, training facilities expansion project. Right now, we have a 25-meter firing range within that facility. We're looking to expand it to 50 meters to reduce our reliance on outdoor firing ranges. Also moving some people from our headquarters into the training facilities, because right now our headquarters building is at capacity or beyond capacity, as some may say. Looking at a renovation addition on our headquarters building. After that, looking at renovating that third floor at Central and at New Central, and then other facility expansion views into the farther future, including our public reporting center here at HU campus and South Division. Next slide, please. And lastly, just next steps. We will be coming back to the board for budget review in November. We are slated to present to Regional Council on November 29th with anticipated board approval on December 15th. And at this point, the region is communicating tentatively that we will gain budget approval by, or they're aiming for budget approval by the end of the year. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kirsten, and appreciate that. And I think what the board witnesses from our Director of Finance and her larger team is a very strategic, methodical approach to all the work that we're doing. They are the center of the hub that pulls together the various projects or operations. And so you can see a very, our board has been very strategic in setting the course around a 10-year capital plan, a reserve strategy, as well as, managing demands operationally. But I think if we were to look at some of the challenges that we face as an organization, is that our staffing and our attrition levels and the way that we've actually staff planned are very much like a circadian rhythm. They're sort of up and down, and we've never been able to smooth our budget out. We've never been able to find this process where we actually have a piece. And so I just want to take the next few minutes to talk about service delivery, the drivers, and the impacts. So where do we find ourselves where we're currently at? Our vision is that every person in our community feels safe and secure, that there's a sense of safety. We want to see individuals thrive. And our service finds itself in the middle of so many different tentacles of what's happening in our community. On average, annually, we head to more than 300,000 calls for service. Those are calls from the community. It doesn't include proactive and other police-led work. And so about 160,000 of those are non-emergency calls. 141,000 of those are 911 emergency calls. On average, every single day, the team that Deputy Hilton leads is managing 800 to 1,100 calls for service. When we look at the complexity of crime in our community, I'd like to spend a little bit of time to take you through why we find ourselves, in front of the board with 5 different scenarios. And 4 of those scenarios include expansion and growth. And one is really a status quo approach, is that we are changing. Our community is changing. When government and when other police services shine the light on the Greater Toronto Area, our community is a part of that Greater Toronto Area now. With the expansion and the investment in Highway 401, Highway 7 and 8, we're seeing a whole different complexity of policing in our community. And that's impacted our total crime severity. It's impacting what's happening in our community. And as the board is well aware through your governance and leadership, is that our crime severity between 2019 and 2020 and previously has continued to increase. You can see the changes here, but we've actually now the 4th highest of the 12 largest communities in Ontario. And you can see that we're slightly even above the national, we're actually above the provincial average and above the national average for crime severity. And that includes, obviously, what we've seen significantly, the gun crime in our community. With that comes the gun violence, the tentacles to the other social challenges we're facing, addiction, social disparity. All of these are having an impact. And of course, we recognize that it has to be a system-wide approach to solving these issues. We alone will not solve this issue. But right now, we have some significant demands on policing. And one of them is that crime severity piece. When we look at violent crime severity, you can see that we're currently at 84.8. This is all from Stats Canada. You can see that, again, we're above the median, both provincially and slightly below the median nationally. And this actually talks to, some of the issues we've been seeing in our community around robberies, organized crime, the ongoing gun violence, 13 shootings year to date. These are some of the challenges that we're facing as an organization. And of course, when we look at the crime severity and violent crime severity, these investigations and these calls for service require resources. They require significant attention. When an initial call comes in, they require significant deployments, which may actually create a significant push on neighborhood policing and then our investigative team. But at the same time, there's other calls for demand that are occurring in our community. And so what we're seeing consistently day to day is that our members, when they're leaving work, they're leaving a series of call for service for the next shift to start. And we're always starting in a deficit. We're always starting in a challenged position to manage the demand of our community. One of the concerning factors, and I know that in particularly Superintendent Fenton, Superintendent Havel, and Deputy Hilton very much focused on this, is the total weighted clearance rates. And of course, Ms. Margaret Glode, my manager of strategic services, very much monitors and looks at workload demand. And of course, one of our concerns that we're seeing is our total weighted clearance, our ability to investigate and clear crime is declining. In fact, we're below the provincial median by 3 points. We're below the Ontario average, and we're below the national average. And so the natural question may be, well, so what? You're clearing less crime. Well, behind all of this are victims. Behind all of this are individuals that have been impacted by crime, but it's also the demand on workload. Our members simply cannot keep up with the amount of work and demand. And so case files, investigative files are sitting. Currently for financial crime, we're anywhere from 12 to 18 months. We can explain more around child pornography and child exploitation. We simply cannot keep up with the demand because we're also policing two worlds. So we're policing a traditional world where, citizens expect to see our blue and white cruiser in a community driving through or responding to an emergency. That is a traditional policing model. The non-traditional policing model is now where humans, where drugs, where guns are trafficked, and where people are exploited. And that is the World Wide Web. It's the cyber world. And we're seeing significant demands. We've been very fortunate. The province of Ontario has included our service in significant provincial funding, but it's not 100%. It's not keeping up with the demand. And so we're trying to find a balance between providing service to two neighborhoods. We also believe as a service and as a leadership team that the non-traditional cyber world may look very different on how we provide policing service to that. It may be through civilian professionals and alternative service delivery with a component of policing. But we are actually very concerned about our ability. Yes, we recognize that we do triage calls. We are implementing technology which will provide better citizen-centered service. But our members are the ones on the front lines who, when a call has been waiting for 3 hours, are the ones that are showing up and are taking the brunt. I may get the email or the phone call, but it's the members doing the work, and their passion is around service. I know our members want to do better. I know our members want more opportunity to be proactive, to be more in the prevention mode, but very much in a reactionary mode. And so what does this look like? I want to give a snapshot around who we are and what it looks like for the rate of police officers. We're currently sitting at 131 police officers per 100,000 individuals. You can see that this continues to decline compared to the 2018 rate. And in fact, we're actually well below 2011 rates. And so simply, we've not kept pace with the demand of our service, the demand of our community, and the growth of our community, both commercial, industrial, as well as residential. We have a growing community, and our staffing levels, particularly on the uniform side, have not kept up pace. And so the demands every single day are creating some challenges. So what does it look like from the scenario perspective? So what does it actually look like from a staffing perspective right now? The board will see the 12 largest police services in Ontario. We're the 6th largest police service. And so you can see where we sit. We sit at 131. The Big 12 rate is 144. The provincial rate is 174, and the national rate is 183. And so we are consistently falling behind. And our traditional staffing models and our staffing plans have always been catch up. And we know that the recruitment and the training of police officers is a complex process. It takes over 12 months to recruit, train, and get them into the field. And so we're consistently finding ourselves consistently moving forward. We're also in a period, and I think as we move into 2022, our attrition rates will slow because back in 88 to 92, our region and our police services commission at the time went through a significant hiring and expansion phase. And then we paused. We went through a significant one in the 2000s and then in 2010. And then it's been very stagnant since then, with the exception of adding 47 in 2019. And so you can see that although we're facing other challenges, so what we've put together to provide some insight to the board is a very, a series of scenarios. You can see scenario number 1, which adds 25 FTEs, would get us to 140 police officers per 100,000. We'd still be below the Big 12 rate, but it would be a significant advancement. You can see scenario 2, which is 35, gets us closer to the provincial rate. Scenario 3 actually almost brings us a line, and scenario 4 aligns us with the actual slightly above the provincial average, still below the Big 12 average, still below the provincial median, still below the national median. We're not advocating for that. What we're advocating for is a long-term approach to how do we actually manage demand on service. Scenario 5, which is a status quo scenario, we would see currently right now our authorized complement would have us at 136. We're below. If we work towards the inflation rate, which would require the reduction of members, you would see us fall even farther behind. And so we wanted to provide this as we roll through. Of course, we're significantly committed to advancing the strategic business plan. Our leadership team believes that our board has a significant vision for the future of policing, a significant commitment to transformation. And, even in scenario 5 and all the scenarios, we still remain very committed to achieving the goals set out by the board. That's our mission. That's what drives us. That's our raison d'etre. We want to adhere to legislative policy and requirements. In addition, we also provide about almost $6 million out of our budget to regional initiatives, including the 911 Communication Center, the Public Safety Answering Point, the dispatch services for municipal bylaw. We do significant flood alert for GRCA in the region. We support Alert Waterloo region. We support our regional municipal emergency management. We provide the Children's Safety Village. And of course, we also have an Indigenous advisor. Our commitment to the path forward is also supplementing the work of the regional chair and the regional office. And so what happens if we don't continue, I guess? This is what keeps me awake and in constant dialogue with Deputy Crowell and Hilton, is what are the impacts if we don't look at some form of long-term strategies to grow and to meet the demands? And it can't all be about policing. I want to be very clear. We have to have a very system-wide approach to this. But if if we don't grow our authorized growth and we maintain salary gapping, these are all opportunities that, we may have to commit to, but we would have to cease investments in growing. We would have to reduce existing FTEs. We'd have to look at the reduction of response to certain calls or potential investigative units. And we've done so many different processes to become lean that I'm not sure where else the community will accept some service cuts. We would pause all promotions and transfers and career development, which impacts the healthy morale in the workplace of our organization. We'd be, looking at cost recovery options from municipalities. And I think the board knows that I'm very much a believer that there is one ratepayer, regardless of where they live. We all contribute, and then cease other FTE secondments that are not fully funded. So these are some of the impacts if we don't look at how do we advance and move to the future. I just want to pause in closing and take a moment, is that regardless of all the challenges, in the last 18 months has been no doubt a difficult time to be in the public sector, including policing. The global pandemic created tremendous opportunities for us to change the way we do business. It presented tremendous opportunities to learn, to grow, to fiscally manage budgets, to look at alternative training solutions. And it really created an opportunity for us to do work. But much of the work we do is human-based and connection-based, and that never stopped throughout the pandemic. When we layered on some social climate and some calls for transformation around policing, this police service board and your leadership team and all of our members came to the table, including our labor organizations, and said, we support reformation, we support change, we support oversight. We've created the path forward. This is about investing in our community. It's about investing in our future. And so when we look at the economic growth and we look at airport expansions and cranes in the skies across downtown Galt and downtown Kitchener and uptown Waterloo and growth in our rural communities, it requires investment. And part of that investment is policing. Recently there's been different decisions about whether the police are at a table or not at a table. And I understand all of those dialogues and discussions. But it's naive to think that we don't intersect with all of those tables. Our greatest partners every single day are family and children's services, our school boards. We're actively involved every single day interacting with young people, with our school boards. We're called to schools. We still do service calls. In fact, some policy decisions have made us less efficient than we were before. Those are outside our control. And so I'd like to engage on behalf of the executive, the board. We recognize these are challenging times for the region of Waterloo. They're challenging times for the province of Ontario, and they're challenging times for our country. Fiscally, socially, we find ourselves in a social revolution of change. We find ourselves in some significant challenges. But I do think, and I firmly commit, my concern is that if we do not invest, we will not meet our mission, which is ensuring people feel safe and are safe. We have a significant addiction challenge in our community. We're committed to working in all facets. We support decriminalization. We support alternative sanctions. We support consumption treatment sites. We support safe supply. But we don't support illicit online trafficking. We don't support those that prey on the vulnerable. And there's a policing component where we need to invest resources. Our gun violence has direct tentacles to the drug trade, to the human trade. Our robberies of convenience stores, our robberies of commercial institutions are tied to significant victim impact crimes. And our break and enters, there's nothing more intrusive than to have your home, your sanctuary broken into. We continue to make arrests, we continue to lay charges, we continue to work with additional partners, but our members are facing significant gaps. And I know they want to do better. I know that they want and they think if we can just invest a little and grow our service to meet the growing demands, we can be better. And so we present to you 5 opportunities, recognizing the significant challenge that you as governors have to manage. I also recognize that if all money goes towards one area, it actually is not the right approach. We need to look at, a regional approach and a global approach to appropriate resourcing. And we receive zero funding from our federal government, but we do significant federal legislation enforcement. And quite frankly, we receive and we're well supported by the Ministry of Solicitor General, but it's minimal. It's a small percent. The Police Services Act, unfortunately, right now is built on municipal taxation. And that's why we see some of the challenges we do with our budget. And finally, in closing, as the board is aware, 90% of our budget is people-based. It's human-based. I cannot make any apologies for that. Our members deserve appropriate compensation. We want to recruit and attract the best of the best. But we also solve complex social issues. And this board gets to see and hear the stories every single day of the difference that our members make. And so again, I look forward to the dialogue on our budget. I recognize that these are significant asks. I recognize the impact this will have on other services. But what I'm encouraged is that how do we look and how do we work collaboratively to build a multi-year approach to closing the gap and advancing our police service. So thank you for the opportunity on behalf of our team to present the 2022 draft operating and capital budget.
So Chief, before I recognize some questions and request feedback from colleagues on the board, I just want to recognize the significant planning and preparation that went into this draft budget, as well as the ongoing management of what is a very complex budget, very much focused, as you reiterated, on people. Our citizens, as well as our WRPS members who serve the region with professionalism. I'd also like to note that this is the first draft of the 2022 budget. It's now time for the board to review, provide feedback, as well as direction. But I really want to thank you for a very clear presentation. 5 scenarios is a whole lot of work, and it gives us a lot of food for thought. I really appreciated the where we stand in the ranking with the big 12, as well as the province and federally. And you know, you also underscored that there really are 2 communities, and I know you've said that so many times. There's the real life community where we all reside, the 630,000 people in the Waterloo region, as well as the virtual community. And it's the service and the input from Waterloo Regional Police Services that keep us safer and feeling safe in both of those. So thank you very much, Chief and team, for bringing this forward. And I'll now open it for questions. Ian, your hand was up first.
Well, thank you, Chair Redmond, and through you. I wasn't sure what to make of the bell tolling in the background when the chief was talking, but I'll leave that for the moment. In reading this document and going over some of our materials, noting that the Police Services Act, the underlying premise is adequate and effective resources. It's a lot of food for thought in the draft that's before us. I mean, maybe start just as a point of clarification, so I get it right, and maybe might be helpful for those listening. In the zero expansion, which is maintaining existing staffing levels in scenario 5, am I seeing that correctly? That it's about 7% increase, just basically to do what we're doing this year, without any additional staffing. Chief?
Is that Chief or Kirsten? Chief, do you want to go? Or?
Go ahead, Kirsten.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, because I think the real issue that you've highlighted and we have to wrestle with is what's the appropriate level of staffing, and then how do we translate the more subjective part of adequate and effective resources for policing? And that's probably a circle and a square, but it's one that we have to come up with. Listen, and maybe Kirsten or maybe the chief. Overtime, I know is an issue, and maybe I know that's I think in some report we looked at or had some discussion on. There's many times that there are overtime requests or needs, and in many cases there's not enough willing or able officers willing to take on overtime. Is that a function of? I mean, I guess I'm asking with overtime requests and needs and not being filled. Is that a function of a variety of things like staffing levels, the wellness and mental health issues? I mean, what's driving that? Because it would seem to me that that's a staffing level issue first and foremost.
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, I do want to recognize our real operation team as well as our regional scheduling team. They've done an excellent job of We've all centralized the resource management under Superintendent Tom Bursey. We've centralized the approach to managing staffing, and so every single day at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. we're monitoring, and Staff Superintendent Goodman and his leadership team monitor all those pieces. We do have set minimums that we want to ensure at the front line. The reality is that it fluctuates. Obviously, there's some peak periods where annual leave and training time and mandatory training does impact the frontline staffing. I mean, that's just all part of running an operation. People are entitled to leave. We celebrate maternity and paternity leaves and all those wonderful things in people's lives. And from time to time, one of the issues we faced in the last 18 months has really been the impact of the pandemic. Although we're moving away, from a different approach as we, really have a significant portion of our members vaccinated. So time away is less and less, but if there's an exposure, we would see multiple impacts. And so you could see, at a one exposure, 5 or 6 resources impacted. Recently, what we're finding, and we're also in the last quarter, so members are trying to use up allotted time and allocated time. But recently, what we've been finding is when we do a call for overtime in our current system, less and less members are actually looking to work the overtime. And there's different reasons for that. But I think, fundamentally, one of the pieces is our members are tired. When they come to work for a 12-hour shift, I mean, that's a long period of time. It has 2 45-minute breaks. But one of the things that I've asked Deputy Hilton to monitor is wellness and lunch breaks. And what we're seeing consistently, particularly in the evening period, is our members are not getting their wellness breaks because the demand for service. And one of the challenges we have is we have very committed individuals. And so even if we just want to say, take your break, they're like, we can't. We're worried about officer safety, member safety. If you look in the last 5 weeks in September, every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, we had a significant deployment in Uptown Waterloo. We have a vibrant entertainment district. It's exciting. It's vibrant. There's a lot happening, but it requires police resources. It requires public order management. And so I think that's what we're seeing. And so some of the initiatives we're looking at is changing the way we offer overtime and let the member actually have some input into, I can do 3 hours, I can do 6 hours, I can do 5 hours versus you sign up for the whole 12 hours because all they're doing is amassing more workload. And so that actually, it just becomes this vicious cycle where they don't feel that they're able to get on top of the workload. And that's one of my concerns. And I know Deputy Hilton echoes that and may have other comments around that, but we, the executive, are having ongoing discussions. We're very concerned. We're concerned about the workload of our members. This is a tough job in the sense of, I equate it to being a dimmer switch. Somebody asked me what policing is like, and I'll say, well, it's like being on a dimmer switch. You can be at 20 watts one moment, and then at 100 watts the next moment, and then at 70 watts the next moment, then back to 100, and then down to 20. And that's all in one shift. And so the level of emotion, the level of alertness has a significant impact. And that's why I think also I'm very proud of this Police Services Board. They have been excellent stewards of wellness and investing in benefits and working with our labor associations around ensuring that our members have access to solid healthcare and benefits. It's very important, and so I credit the board for really tackling some significant legacy issues around bargaining and collective agreements in partnership with our labor association. It's taken tremendous leadership by Chair Redmond and all of the board. But those are impacts, Mr. McLean. Those are real impacts. And if you can't fill the seats, they just run the vacancy, and all you're doing is actually the member who's coming to work is taking on more work.
So just one more, I guess it's less a question in the interest of time, but with the pressure on the budget around, additional expansion of members, and then you talked earlier in this session around alternative service delivery for what would amount to white collar crime, cyber, and other things that could be outsourced or done in a different way. Would those be two of the elements that this board should be saying, let's have a more of a pro forma 5-year budget? Because doing this 1 year at a time doesn't really kind of get you, because I'm not entirely sure, it's possible. I'm not sure you could absorb the full amount of new officers in 1 year anyways, but how would we look at an appropriate timeline for incorporating alternative service delivery to manage down or manage the increasing needs, as well as the pressures of budgets, which are real.
Yeah, I think it's a discussion that I have with Kirsten on a regular basis is, what's the annualized impact? And so can we look at different scenarios? We provided 5 scenarios today to the board, which we felt very strongly about around that, listen, can we smooth this out? I mean, had we just taken small increments, even between 2019 and 2022, and looked at other opportunities, what would the impact be on today's budget? It's, one of the questions I always look at. And traditionally, we've not done that. And I accept all responsibility for that. Those are decisions that I make as the chief around how do we manage fiscal pressures of the region? How do we ensure that everybody has support? The region is facing other multitude of complex issues. Safety is one of those, I believe, and crime is one of those, but they have other challenges which are very important. And so I think, one of the discussions and that I've had with Chair Redmond is around what does it look like a refined approach, even if we look at long-term strategies. And so, we look at 2022, but we also perhaps in November show the board this is what 2023, 2024 would look like, these types of investments and growth. And we start to, I always think that I look to Miss C. She always likes to see my budget line sort of straight and flat. I know she gets a little upset with me when it's up and down, and I fully understand that. And that's the discussion I have with Kirsten is how do we flatten it? How do we actually find that balance? We're trying to do that on capital projects. I mean, Kirsten and the facility team's done an amazing job. So your comments are well taken. I think it's definitely an option that as we look at dialogue and direction that we should consider.
Thank you, Chief. Carl.
Thanks very much. And thanks, Chief and Kirsten and the team for making this presentation. No doubt, from what we all see, there's some tough decisions to be made and of course, probably some tough questions to answer. Anyways, I was thinking, and I'm not sure if this is for you, Chief, or for Kirsten, but the WRPS is projecting a positive variance at year end. So what's driving the variance, and what is the recommendation of the WRPS to the board on managing the variance? And can it offset the 2022 budget impact?
Kirsten, over to you.
So yes, we are forecasting a surplus this year, and the main reason related to that was being under authorized complement. So I had mentioned earlier that our vacancy target was 18, and at times for a good portion of the year, we were 20 to 30 above that vacancy target. So that really contributed towards savings to the bottom, and the workload potentially impact to employee morale issues as well. As of August, we are not meeting that vacancy target. So that's a positive thing, and that's predominantly on the sworn side through more recruitment. At this point, we look at our funding of our capital projects and reducing our reliance upon debentures, which have an operating budget impact, the more debentures that we issue. Right now, our capital reserve is forecasted to go into a deficit in 2026. And that deficit grows to about $23 million deficit at the end of our 10-year horizon. And our vehicle reserve goes also into a deficit. So what I would be interested in doing is taking that surplus, similar to what we've done in previous years, and increasing our reserves so that we could mitigate some of that debenture funding. There always is the opportunity to pull some money from the reserve to offset budget increases, but you need to be careful because it turns around and impacts you the next year, similar to how the salary vacancy discussion is impacting us by the 1% in this 2022 budget. So there's just a word of caution that it does not allow you to mitigate those debentures, and it will turn around and impact kind of that longer term forecast as well.
So what you're saying is the recommendation you're saying would be to increase the reserves. Is that it?
It would be my preference to increase the reserves to mitigate debentures. Yes.
And do you feel it can offset the 2022 budget, the impact?
No? Yeah, as I mentioned, it we could use it to offset 2022 budget increases, but it will impact us in 2023. We've done that on the benefit side. We've phased in increases and we've pulled money from the benefit stabilization reserve to offset some of these increases. So, that's another option that is before us as well.
I agree with you. You have to be careful when you're looking at those things, those reserves in particular. Thanks, Kirsten.
Sandy, go ahead.
Thank you. This one I think is going to be for the chief. We recognized Sergeant Preble at the beginning and talked about the importance of relationships, and she had a great relationship with the community up here in Elmira, and I know, and as does Sergeant Cassidy, and that's been really key, even during COVID, right? Are those relationships, but they take time, and so I can appreciate that if there's not enough time in the day to make relationships. That's a difficult thing. We've also had calls for creating relationship from some of our other communities through the cities and so on. So that all affects our level of staffing, really, if we're going to take care of cybercrime and the more severe crimes that we keep seeing coming through. And so that brings me to my question. And I was just comparing the crime severity in different services with the number of officers per 100,000. And I guess what I was wondering when I did that was if there's a higher contingent of officers per 100,000, does the crime severity go down? And it doesn't seem to. And so I'm not sure if there's more officers per 100,000 because the crime is more severe, or if there's something that doesn't quite mesh there. I wonder if you can comment on that.
Who would like to take that, Kirsten or the chief?
I was thinking Deputy Hilton, because this is her wheelhouse. But no, it's an excellent point. I mean, obviously, there's different correlations, there's different pieces, and I'm not suggesting that, one of the challenges often is when you add increased or you focus attention of policing in one particular area, you'll actually see crime increase because we're detecting more, we're actually potentially laying more charges, arresting more people. It's sort of like impaired driving. If you look at drug impaired driving, it's gone up significantly in our community. I firmly don't believe more people are driving impaired by drug. It's just that we've paid more attention. We have better skilled, better trained members of our traffic services team doing better work. And so it's the correlation piece. Where I think we're struggling is actually managing the level of severity and the actual number of scenarios. So if you look at, Superintendent Fenton, is leading and managing their team, the 13 shootings. These are complex investigations with significant amount of work ongoing. We solved 4 of the 13 shootings. We have a number of progressive leads in the other shootings. We have some victims that won't, cooperate, will not participate. But it's the volume of work. It's actually, we simply cannot keep up with the volume. And so something needs to give. Particularly around, if you look at the most recent project we did in September, where we arrested 14 individuals, laid more than 60 charges, significant fentanyl seizures, that in itself is, a 3 to 6 month project with dedicated resources. The drugs and firearms team is focused on that. And at the same time, during that period, we have a series of other pieces. In September, we had 2 homicides. The 2 homicides require significant resources. They include, forensic, they include community engagement. And so, it's not just about, the homicide. We want to be the voice for the victim, but there's also community building. As you're well aware, we're doing a lot of community work right now in Wellesley. We're also doing a lot of community engagement and work in Paulander with the death of an 18-year-old. These are horrific, tragic crimes. And so I think that where I'm going with all of this is we need a refresh as a region on crime reduction, on crime strategies. Right, if I'll use intimate partner violence, Deputy Hilton and I have been discussing this. We have a world-class approach to how we actually respond to intimate partner violence, but we've never been able to reduce it. So we still have more than 5,000 reported cases a year of intimate partner violence in our region. And we're very good at responding. We're very good at managing it. But how do we get proactive? How do we get preventive? How do we build strategies? Same thing with gun violence. Part of, I think, as we refine the budget, will need to be a recommendation, to your point, Mayor Shantz, on how do we actually reduce violent crime? What is our reduction approaches? How do we work with all of our partners? Because we can't do it alone. We're one portion, we're one piece of this. And so to your point, I think what I'm really focused on is workload, call management, but it's also around the wellness of our members. We're in the people business and our members are working extremely hard. And I'm concerned that if we don't continue to provide some form of investment, we're going to have to do business differently, cease doing certain things. So I look at rural policing. Our rural communities are growing, and I'm glad we're virtual, because I know when you see me, you'll probably want to give me a slight kick for moving Kelly. But it was a great opportunity for Kelly to take her skill sets and transform and build other opportunities. But in our rural communities, the demand is different. Our road safety teams spend a lot of time in rural communities because that's where the bulk of our fatal collisions are. And so we're doing a lot of work in those rural communities. But as you know, it's the whole different approach to policing. And we've not invested in rural communities. And what we're seeing in rural communities is that crime is increasing. Crime is increasing in Elmira. Crime is increasing in Baden and New Hamburg and some of the larger centers. And if we don't get a handle on it, then we're always playing catch up. And so I think that there's more work to be done on all of this, but for me, it's really tied to workload, but we cannot keep up. I mean that sincerely. Our members are they're stretched. And so something needs to give.
Sandy, any further comments or questions?
If I could ask another question, and this is probably a tough one, and maybe you can't even really answer it, but I'm sure you can comment on it. There's a call, and at the region, we want to look at upstream solutions to issues. And in my mind, when you're transitioning between two different ways of, if you want to call it doing business, there's a period of time where it's really expensive because you're really operating two systems in a sense. So as we look at improving some of our upstream work, how do you pull those two together, and do you see that that there'll be decreases in costs down the road as we sort of come through that transition? It's probably not an answer, but
no, I think it's an excellent point. I mean, our service is fully committed to prevention, fully committed to upstream work. In fact, I think a lot of upstream work is happening in our region. I think that there's a narrative that it's not happening, and I disagree with that. I think that you look at the work of connectivity tables. There's more than 400 children and youth agencies across our region that is doing upstream work. Our school system is all about upstream work. It's about building fine young citizens. Our family and children's services is looking at a whole bunch of different pieces. And so when you look at the provincial and federal funding that goes into social services and public health, when you look at that collectively, it is my belief that it's far outpacing the investment in the judicial system. So I take a bit of a different approach, because I think a lot of really positive upstream work is actually being done. Can it be done more coordinated? Can it be done more with different pieces of accountability? Probably. And we want to be a part of that. But I think that there's a lot of upstream work happening. I use the analogy of, dipping your toes in the bathtub. I mean, you can't just shut one tap off and turn the other tap on, and you're right. But I also don't think you can change this overnight. And I mean, we're dealing with some real live issues here around violent crime and call demand on policing. And I'm certainly willing, I want to give up work. There's things that, we want to actually transition to and transition out of. But I can tell you in the last 19 months, nobody has knocked on my door. In fact, what I'm getting is actually more demands. And we've seen some policy decisions recently, in my view, that have made the system less efficient and less coordinated. And so I think we actually need a refresh. And I'm hoping that the community safety and well-being approach is a refresh. I hope that it invests. I mean, I'm always heartened to see our federal and provincial government investing in affordable housing, addressing in food insecurities, because that helps long-term policing. But I think if we do get this right, a decade from now, we should see reductions in demand on policing. But I think it's unrealistic to expect it next year. I just think it's actually naive in many ways. And I'm an idealist. Deputy Hilton will chuckle at this. I want to see these. I want to wave the magic wand. But over time, I just don't think that that's reality. We've got some serious complex issues. And I think, as you know, Mayor Shantz, if we look at addiction, 18,000 Canadians have died in Canada in the last 5 years. How is this acceptable at any level of government? Hundreds within our community have died. How is this acceptable? We've been arguing and trying to figure out consumption treatment sites for more than 5 years. We've been arguing over safe supply. And so for me, I firmly believe that, we have to take a much more coordinated systems approach. All levels of government need to work together. I've been calling for unity. I've been calling for leadership. I've been very vocal on public health issues because I believe they have a significant role to play. And if we get that right, I do believe that long-term we'll see reductions in judicial, policing, correctional systems. The correctional system is not designed to treat the acute complex issues of the individuals that we're sending there. So I'm fully supportive of that. But I also think as there's people calling for upstream, I also think there's people calling. I can tell you that in downtown Cambridge, in downtown Kitchener and uptown Waterloo, the request I'm getting is for more policing, not less. We've had municipalities change their road safety speed limits. Now what I'm getting is more demand for road safety initiatives. And so these are policy decisions, when the federal government decriminalized marijuana, one of the, the Canadian chiefs and myself were supportive of that, but the unintended consequence now is Superintendent Fenton as a whole team managing illegal online cannabis sales. Several of our homicides in our region are directly related to the illegal sale of marijuana. And so there's unintended consequences of policy decisions. So I fully support upstream, but I also think, and I want to challenge all of us to take a stock and an inventory of all the upstream work that's happening in our region, because it's happening. Millions are being invested in it. Can we invest more? Probably, but I still think that we do a discredit when we say we're not doing upstream work to the many agencies that are doing upstream work.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sandy, for those questions. I'm going to go to Karen and Rosita, and then I will circle back. I know Ian's got his hand up. And Sandy, if you have other questions, put your hand back up, okay? Karen, please go ahead.
Sure, thank you. And Sandy took, you were sort of on stream with two of my questions, so I was going to ask sort of about exactly what Sandy just did related to the shifting of services. And I know it's, something that would show up, I think, in staffing in significant out years as opposed to next year. And so I was going to ask about that, but Sandy already did. I also want to come back, my apologies, because this is just my academic piece coming in. And the presentation had, a couple of those charts. And so Sandy already pointed out one of the things I noticed, which was the, correlation or causation or whatever related to staffing levels and severity of crime. And I would also caution perhaps the relationship between clearing cases and staffing levels as well, because I noticed the same thing. If I looked at it, Windsor must be an outlier, which is one of my other questions, because when I look at staffing levels, when I look at all of the stuff, Windsor just seems to be really disproportional to everybody else. And if we're using the Big 10 as a reference point for staffing, you may want to look at it both with Windsor and without, just because it seems to be weird when I look at all of the other things. But I noticed, and this is more just a comment, I noticed also with clearance rates, I look at Halton, and Halton is one where proportionally has a lower number, lower than our region, and yet I think was the area that had highest clearance. So I wasn't really sure I buy all of the other information. I'm not sure some of the takeaways from the presentation related to the statistics that we had, and I'm not sure. Interesting information. I think there's better data that we know about what's actually going on in the ground here to support what the chief has been saying related to the needs, for ongoing support in our community and bringing us up to a level. We're also a growing community, and that has big implications as well. I also think it's really challenging to compare things to 2020 when most of our student populations weren't here, and we're already seeing now just big uptakes in volume as students come back and they want to see their friends, as we saw what was happening with homecoming and things like that, and orientation. So it's hard to compare to 2020, 2021 in terms of volumes for things. So I think it supports the need to make sure that we are adequately resourced as things become more normalized again in our community. But again, I thank Mayor Shantz for her question related to what are we actually looking at and doing over the longer term related to some of those, not trade-offs is a wrong word, but we know we've been working with mental health communities and other partners who are over time, perhaps the more appropriate diversion. And I know in some of our consent, there was some information related to how successful some of that diversion is already being. So I think our support, continue to support as a board for those diversion things, but again, it will take time.
Thank you, Karen. And if I can just add a little bit of editorial comment, the upstream versus funding police to me is a false equation and a false paradigm, because it should be yes and. We absolutely have to have adequate resources for our police, and we have to continue those partnerships and investment in upstream. Rosita, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, staff, for providing the 5 scenarios. It's good that at least we can compare dollars. And my observation, same as Dr. Shah, is the weighted clearance versus the rate of officer. I don't know whether there's a more correlation between the two than the crime rate. But my question about the rate of officer is our data is 2019, and the weighted clearance here, you have a 2020 data. Like, is there any updated version of the rate of officer for the other municipality, like the Big 12? Are we further apart from the differential? Like, have they get more officers now and we're further away from them? My second question is regarding the scenarios, the dollar increase. It looks like from 25 to 35 to 45, the dollar increase is exactly like 1,500 difference, right? So are we assuming we're getting the same recruit, the same rate of, like, my question is, like, are they the same people that we're hiring, or are there different levels of people that we're hiring, officers that we're hiring?
Thank you, Rosita. Kirsten, is this a question for you or for the chief?
I think I'll tackle the first part and then turn the budget piece over. So excellent point on these are the data we've shown today is from Stats Canada. And the cop to pop ratio is from a report called Police Resources in Canada. They no longer do it annually. They do it every other couple of years based on Stats Canada and based on obviously financial implications. And so we do not have 2020 data. The weighted clearance rate is done annually because that's actually part of the Crime Statistics Stats Canada report that they still do annually. That's why there's the variance and the difference. And so in fairness, we did not do any projections because we wanted to keep the Stats Canada data as is as we roll through here. But we can definitely look at what other services have done. To Dr. Schnarr's comment, Windsor is an outlier, and it's basically on their deployment model. Their 2-person cars 24 hours a day. And so the deployment model is slightly different, being based on where they are geographically to the USA. So they are an outlier. So we can definitely refine the data and actually look at those pieces. The other on the financial piece, I'll flip it over to Kirsten.
So for the different scenarios, depending upon the FTE, it is the same value that's being used in terms of the different FTEs to be added. And it was based upon a new officer joining the organization and that start rate. And then upon that, we layer on benefit costs, the costs associated with outfitting that officer, because of course we need to provide them with use of force, uniforms in that first year. There's also a ratio of how many officers, at which point you then need to add a vehicle. And a fully outfitted vehicle hybrid is sitting at about $64K a year, and then the associated gasoline, maintenance. And what we've done is we've moved to a strategy that Peel uses quite successfully in terms of recognizing the fact that when we add officers, there's an associated impact on some of the support services. So with each officer that's added, there is a mechanism that there's money allocated for some of those upfront costs. But then subsequent to that, in future years, there's an element that allows you to also ensure that you have appropriate funding for some of those support areas that are required to support additional officers from our admin side, such as communicators, in our records, information processing specialists, IT, etc. We do.
Sorry, go ahead.
We have a list of FTEs, prioritized FTEs based upon business cases that have been done internally, but for the purposes of the scenarios, those itemized lists of FTE requirements haven't been specifically uniquely identified.
Thank you. So Rosita, do you have any further questions or comments?
Thank you. So will it be more refined than the second round with like the scenario as to identify the positions and the cost? I know you have a formula to do it, right? But I just want to know ultimately when we have to see the final package, would it be more refined then, or?
Chief?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. We can definitely refine. Obviously, as we alluded to, this is an iteration. It's based on staff discussion, and we obviously the board requires input and impact. So we can definitely. That's, I think, the outcome of this. We're hoping is, how do we refine? What does it look like? Absolutely commit to refinement.
Thank you.
Back to Ian.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. I know we're running short on time, so I'll maybe condense my my comments. But I wanted to turn to the correspondence that was received by from the Waterloo Region District School Board. I have a couple of questions for the chief, and then some comments. I just would start by saying the cognitive dissonance of the correspondence that we received in relation to the youth and policing presentation we had today is really stark. But it also reinforces my annoyance with the correspondence that was sent to us and the decision around the school policing program and the follow-up correspondence. Maybe just briefly, Chief, I know you and I are nothing if not never brief, but if you can try and be, the program the school board canceled. Just a brief backgrounder for folks. How long has it been in place? What was the intent and original purpose? And has it changed over the years? Because I think people should have a context for this program.
Chief?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. McLean. So thank you very much. I mean, in various forms, it had been in place for approximately 30 years. Over that time, it had evolved and changed. There was also provincial protocols, the Safe School Act, et cetera, where we did have formalized memorandums of understandings with the various school boards. And it was really designed, around youth outreach, youth engagement, building relationships, changing the perception of policing, in those processes. We delivered presentations in law classes, in elementary schools. It was, sort of the kindergarten, grade 2, grade 4, grade 6. There was the actual provincially run program, which was VIP, values, influences, and peers. There's a variety of things. In fact, Deputy Hilton and I, many moons ago, were both school liaison. Back then it was school liaison officers. We had a variety of schools. We would engage in after-school activities, preschool activities, and sometimes actually, candidly, just hanging out in the schoolyard or in the hallways. Over time, it did evolve, and the complexities of our school system did evolve. And I would say in the last decade, it worked very closely. The school resource officers worked very closely with school administration, guidance counselors. They would mitigate and manage calls for service at the school. So rather than the school going through the general emergency or 911 process, it would, there'd be direct liaison and direct contact with the school resource officer. If they weren't at the school, they would respond to the school. They would manage the incident, manage all those involved, work with school administrators, work under the guise of the legislation of the Safe School Act. As we roll through here, they would continue to do presentations. We had a number of officers that were, voluntary coaches and voluntary leaders in after-school activities, those types of processes, which all of those things can continue. But that was really the thrust of it. They basically, because schools are small villages within our community. They have a culture. They have a school president who's maybe in many ways like the mayor of the school, and they have a school principal who's maybe like the regional chair, and they all work in concert in all these different processes, and it's its own ecosystem. And so, but that also comes with challenges. It comes with, and what we've seen probably in the last 5 years change significantly is the traditional school-based bullying, school-based violence has really transitioned to cyber-based as we roll through here. So that was the essence of the program. It did evolve. Did it do calls for service? Yes, it did. Did it actually at times lay charges and arrest students? Yes, it did, based on incidences within the school. But I can tell you that, the demand for school-based incidences hasn't changed. I mean, now it's just the way we respond has changed. In many ways, I actually believe where we've landed is less efficient than where we were. But we are working with other school boards around reimagining and re-envisioning. Staff Superintendent Goodman is working on that. We're currently working on a whole new restructure and renewal of the memorandum of understanding as we roll through. So again, I think everybody knows my position on this. I think in a time of the complex challenges we're facing, we need integration, we need unity, we need to be working together. We don't need division, we don't need separation, we don't need exclusion. And so that's what we're committed to. We'll find the way forward. Other boards are still very much interested in partnerships and doing things, and we'll find our way in particular with the public board. And so hopefully that answers your questions.
Yeah, thanks. And I guess you made very clear in your budget presentation the process for the budget consultation, the board's role, et cetera, because it's not clear to me that the school board knows how that process works. When I read in the paper Liz Montero's article that money spent on resource officers can go to region services, say board trustees, as far as I'm concerned, and unless someone tells us differently, I'm pretty sure it's us that will make the allocations around as a police services board. It's my understanding that there was, and I guess I'll say this as a comment as opposed to a question, because I'm pretty sure it's factually correct. There was limited, if no consultations between the school board staff and the chief or your staff around modifying or changing the program. We were informed that it was something they didn't want to continue on with, which is disappointing when you're trying to have a partnership. When they canceled the program, and then subsequently send this correspondence recently, the correspondence itself was sent to the regional chair, not the chair of the police services board. So again, not understanding the process, not respecting the process, nor this board, which is really disappointing. And my understanding, it was also posted on their social media feed before it ever made it into the regional chair's office, let alone the police board or the police services. Really disappointing. So a couple of comments, and these are editorial, so take them for what they're worth. We've mentioned already, we have a unique responsibility under the Act for adequate and effective policing in our community. The manner that this was raised by the school board does a disservice to the complexity and the importance of the issues. As a member of the board, I know I'm proud of the police service and our officers doing important work across the community, keeping us safe, and with a specific attention for care for youth and their welfare. So I'd also point out, in doing some reading, getting ready for this meeting, that in the latest Wellbeing Waterloo Region survey, there's a greater trust in the police service than there is in the school system. And if the Waterloo District School Board needs more funding, I think they should direct their attention to the provincial government in Queen's Park. Reform and change in policing is something both this board, certainly I do, the chief take seriously. Change is needed and is coming. It requires a commitment by everybody, including staff, frontline officers, management, this board, and the community. And it demands serious attention to be given to it. So this board and the police service are committed to youth and to the community. It's important that the change needed not be wrapped up in politics, and it would seem that the Waterloo District School Board had no interest in a respectful, meaningful dialogue prior to asking for the program to be terminated, and then after the fact, try to come back and inform us where we should reallocate resources to. So the conclusion one could easily come to is that this decision and correspondence is about politics and not policy. So I just leave it with this, some free advice. For the Waterloo District School Board, take a refresher course on what their responsibilities are. Take a refresher course on what our responsibility is as a police services board, and maybe try a new approach to government relations and advocacy. So I'll leave it there because we have important work to do. And this is a sideline and a small, it's not a big enough way to look at the issues that are before us.
Thank you, Ian. I won't ask anybody to comment on that. Thank you for that intervention. So Chief, I know this is first blush. And again, I really appreciate the fact that it's a complex system. There are a lot of demands. I know we're continuing to navigate the global pandemic, and our region's working hard to address a series of complex social issues. As you've mentioned, homelessness, affordable housing, addiction, systemic racism, long-term financial stability, as well as we're looking at the increase of crime severity. So I guess a couple of things from the chair that I sit in. I really did appreciate the dialogue around the upstream investment, the fact that it already exists and it's a yes and not an either or. I think that's a really important message that needs to be carried forward by the Police Services Board, as well as being acknowledged by Regional Council. I would be really interested, and I'm not asking for this today, and I really don't want this to be a make work project, but there are so many regional services that the police service provides for the region and area municipalities. I think that would be a really interesting, I think of voice radio. There's a couple others. Communication center, I know that got punted out. And I know that as you built this first blush budget, you have done some of those things. So I'm going to ask the board if they would consider directing the chief to refine this draft operating budget as well, to provide us with a renewed focus on how we can review scenario 5 while considering the financial impacts of scenario 1 and 2. What I heard loud and clear is that we are still lurching from boom and bust about when we hire staff, and then we have these long times when we don't hire staff, and it ends up with a disproportionate number of people being able to retire at the same time. And it really whipsaws that nice straight line that Rosita and Kirsten, I'm sure, would love to see. So I'm going to ask if the board would be agreeable with that kind of direction to the chief, really looking at a sustainable balancing approach recognizing that there are lots of financial constraints and impacts on the service, but I think that this is a way forward where we can look at creative solutions, maybe have some cost avoidance and options that we could then consider in November, and maybe a reduced set of scenarios. I don't know if that makes your life easier, Kirsten, and your colleagues or not, but then again, we would have an opportunity to look at it. And I don't know, Chief, if you want to comment on that suggestion.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, thank you to all of you for your very thoughtful, candid feedback and comments. They give us food for thought, and I do appreciate all of the discussion, because you're obviously also providing us a different lens and representing our community. So in short, yes, we will refine and continue to work. We'll work around scenario 1 and 2 and 5 and look at long-term sustainability pieces, as well as pull together some of the infrastructure that we support elsewhere. So all doable, and we'll get to work while we actually have a budget meeting planned for tomorrow morning. So we'll start. And again, I do very much appreciate your leadership, your wisdom, your governance. And I think this was a very positive, healthy, engaged dialogue. And again, I do know fundamentally that all of you very much support the 1,200 members of our service. I'm always amazed at your caring compassion and your messages to me when our members are involved in significant issues and challenges in our community. So I thank you for that on behalf of our members.
Thank you. Ian, did you want to provide comment or have a question?
Yeah, just briefly, if we're going to sort of ask for that to be kind of refined, as part of that, I think, because I think it's about the resources needed and how it's going to be implemented and over what period of time. So I think I'd just like to make sure that you know, the issues around the longer term staffing, so that, as you say, Chair Redmond, we don't go from this boom and bust and kind of do something this year and then miss a couple of years, which only exacerbates the problem. So I want to make sure that in refining down what is manageable this year, which there are budget constraints, that there's a more of a longer range staffing plan with both the service and the board and the community can have that expectation. So I just leave that as part of the refinement that the chief and the administration go through.
That's great. What I'm hearing you say is maybe a multi-year projection, so that we're not just doing this year by year, but we're actually doing it over a few years.
Yeah.
Thank you. Colleagues, any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much, Chief. And Kirsten, do you have enough to continue to have your meeting in the morning?
We have plenty. It's going to be exciting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next agenda item is the monthly Chief of Police report, and this is verbal. So over to you, Chief.
Well, thanks very much, Chair Edmund. In the interest of time, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. And so I just simply want to highlight very quickly the work of our major event in our North Division and our Neighborhood Policing Division. September is a busy month for us. We welcome a significant amount of students to our community that contribute so much more than often what we see. They're heavily involved in recreation, leisure activities, and fundraising and social activities. They also breed significant economic growth. Over the month of September, for 5 weeks, we did operate Project Safe Semester, as well as did work very closely with all the post-secondary institutions. However, I feel compelled, I do want to give a shout out to Wilfrid Laurier University, in particular, Dr. Ivan Joseph, for his significant leadership and partnership with the police service. A lot of planning goes into managing these different pieces. You'll note throughout Project Safe Semester, and I will explain that clock, there is a significant, I promise. But, you look at over the 5 weeks, we had a vibrant entertainment district. Young people are coming out of the pandemic. I can tell you that, our Uptown Waterloo and their AGCO, we work very closely with them to ensure a safe environment for all. Locally, we should be very proud. Yes, we did have a couple of pop-up incidences. We managed those very quickly. We worked very closely, and particularly with Wilfrid Laurier, to manage those issues. But I'm very proud of the team, Project Safe Semester, our DART team, our North Division officers, and all that supported our traffic services team. And of course, our major event planning team sets the national standard. We did have, obviously, a homecoming, the University of Waterloo and Wilfrid Laurier. I understand that University of Waterloo was triumphant in this year's big game. But that being said, we did not see the unsanctioned gatherings. So yes, we had host parties. But those things, if I'm candid, happen every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night in a student district. That's part of the culture. It's part of the flavor, and it's what makes it also very electric up there. It's an exciting place to be, and so I'm very proud of our work of the City of Waterloo. But I do believe that the board, when we look at the amount of charges we laid, we limited the cost, significantly declined our cost to $200,000 within our operating budget. We did not require outside services. We did not see some of the challenges that other communities faced, and I think that's a credit to all the partners, but it's also a credit to the student unions and their leadership, as well as everybody working collaboratively. And so I want to just highlight that. I know that this continues to be a focal point, but I do think we're making progress. I do think we're making change. We'll continue to plan into the end of the year and into next year, but we should be proud of the work that we're doing. I can tell you that agencies across the country and communities across the country are calling our region. They're calling, in particular, Wilfrid Laurier University, saying, how are you making this work? How are you working collaboratively? And I think we should be proud of that. And so again, a special shout out to my colleague, the president of Wilfrid Laurier, Dr. Deb McClatchy, and a special shout out to Dr. Ivan Joseph for his leadership on this matter. It was, I think we did well as a community. And finally, a special thanks to all of our members. I firmly believe that every single day we are making a difference in our community. I firmly believe that we do impact individuals in a positive note. And we have a story to tell. And I think we need to do a better job of telling our stories from time to time. But I'm immensely proud and privileged to serve as the chief, and I'm proud of our leadership team. The board, we're grateful for your leadership and wisdom. As we head into November, no doubt we have work to do. But I want to assure you our commitment to looking at the greater system, to looking at the greater good of our community. Yes, we have a role to play, but we're not the sole actor in the play. We have various roles. And so again, thanks so much. And I know that all of us will be in touch, but I do look forward to once again returning in November with a primary focus on budget and how we advance an investment in our community. So thank you for the opportunity. I wish you well.
Thank you, Chief, very much. I would tell you, I think it's been a very productive meeting. Before I entertain a motion to adjourn, which I realize everybody will do with regret, I just want to alert staff or media who are in, if you want to stay in this connection, and I believe Sherry Greeno will take over quarterbacking any media questions. The Chief and I will remain in the meeting. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Carl, seconded by Rosita, all in favor. That's great. Thank you all for a really productive meeting and look forward to working in common cause. Take care.